I had been in the condo for just a couple of days and I heard her hysterically screaming death threats. Again, we shared a wall. I could hear it very clearly coming through the wall, and it was disturbing. It sounded unhinged, and just by the tone, I knew that she was going to follow through with it.
I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Amy Nisus, who became the target of her unhinged neighbor.
A week after settling into her new condo, Amy heard her next-door neighbor hysterically screaming death threats.
She revealed to Amy that she gained access to her condo when she wasn't home and that she'd been watching her comings and goings.
After years of harassment, Amy lodged a formal complaint to the HOA, and her stalker went ballistic, banging on her door, ringing her doorbell, and screaming at her through her door when she didn't answer.
Amy turned to the police, who treated her situation as a petty neighbor dispute, until they discovered the truth about her stalker's massive history of harassment and abuse.
Amy, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What was life like for you right before you moved into your new condo?
Well, I was in my late 30s, had just gained a job at a global company, and I traveled a lot. Had just come back from the Galapagos and was digging into maybe not wanting to work in the corporate life so much and maybe trying my hand at writing a novel. And it was a pretty quiet life.
What made you decide to move?
Well, I had been renting up to that point, and homeownership is stability. So when a condo that was in my price range, which I couldn't afford much, but when it came up in my price range and it seemed like it was a great neighborhood, I jumped on it.
What was your neighborhood like?
Beautifully landscaped. Just really beautifully landscaped. I really thought that I'd hit the jackpot.
Can you tell us about what the neighbors were like when you first moved in?
Well, I actually got a heads up that something wasn't quite right, even when I was looking at the condo as a buyer. There was a box of really weird psychology books outside my neighbor's door, or the woman who would become my neighbor. The door was about 5 feet away from mine, and which meant we shared a wall. So that was the first indicator that someone next door wasn't quite right. And again, it was just really strange psychology books. Why were they stacked outside her door? Weird, but I had attributed it to just kookiness or harmless kookiness. As for the first impression after I moved in, I had been in the condo for just a couple of days and I heard her hysterically screaming death threats. Again, we shared a wall. I could hear it very clearly coming through the wall. And it was disturbing. It sounded unhinged, and just by the tone, I knew that she was going to follow through with it. And I became afraid of her.
Did you think these death threats were directed toward you?
No, not towards me. I just thought that someone else was in trouble.
What kind of things was she screaming?
It was things like just curses, and that she was going to destroy them.
After you heard the screaming, did you have any encounter with her, like, right after?
It was a few months afterwards. The screaming and strange noises kept continuing, and I'll take a step back and explain what I mean by screaming and hysterics, which you guys have already explained. But it was more than just she's playing her TV too loud or she might be talking too loud. There was an edge to it that was alarming and disturbing. Like it felt like a wild animal in a trap. Or, I would even describe it as the insane asylum in Batman, Arkham, the Institute for the Criminally Insane, where it's like everything is just off. It's disturbing. There's something going wrong with her, and there's something going to happen to someone else. As her screams were escalating, I just tried to avoid her. But they kept getting worse and worse. And like I said, they sounded frantic, like there was something wrong with her. There was something wrong with someone else. It was disturbing. I tried lodging complaints with the homeowner association, but they didn't want to deal with it. So up to that point, I thought that I could stay away from her. But the HOA, the homeowner association, let me know that I needed to take action on my own. So it was either live with the strangeness or talk to her face to face.
How long after the screaming went on next door did you go and approach the HOA?
It was maybe for a couple of months where I told them I was hearing things. Maybe for a couple of months. I'd say that I was there for close to a year before I did something about it directly with my neighbor.
Did this happen every night?
Not every night. It like every few weeks or so. After a while, I had to listen to the HOA and just say, hey, I need to discuss this with her and let her know that whatever's happening, I can hear it. And I felt uneasy, but I felt like I had no other choice. So when I knocked on her door, I just expected everything to be resolved. I would tell her, hey, I can hear you. She would, apologize. I would apologize back, and then everything would just be fine.
And what did happen when you went there?
She acknowledged, well, first off, when I first knocked on her door, I got the sense that she really didn't even register that someone was standing there. Like she just seemed to be seeing straight through me. When she did kind of acknowledge that there was a human being standing there, she was in agreement, like, yes. And she said, yes, I scream sometimes. I get under duress, but you don't want to hear it. And I'll do better. She actually said, I will try to keep it down, which alarmed me. Like, okay, you're going to try. This doesn't sound good. And then she started discussing my home. And my condo needed a lot of work. I did a partial flip on it. So even before I moved in, I was having painters come in and paint and other repairs. And that's where she said, oh yeah, I saw that you've been doing all these repairs. And so I went in and looked around, and she started describing my wall colors and the layout in very acute detail, which alarmed me.
Do you think that she was in there while the workers were in there, or after you had actually moved in?
I think it was when the workers were there. Maybe the door was unlocked.
Were other neighbors aware of her activity?
I did try and talk with the neighbors on the other side of her, and just to get some perspective, like maybe they know a way of working with her that I don't. And they were aware of it, and they had indicated that she was off of her, she, meaning my stalker, was off of her medication. Turns out that they were friends. And what I found out later was that my conversation with them, with her friends, I'll call them Frank and Jackie, when I tried to talk to Frank and Jackie, I think it threatened them. And I found out later that they had written her a letter of recommendation that said, hey, we have no problem with this woman, and Amy's the one with the problem. And when I started having to call the police more and more, that letter kept getting circulated that discredited me, gave her more credit, and prevented me from getting help.
How did other neighbors react to you after that letter circulated?
I don't know if any of the neighbors saw it. I know that it was sent to the homeowner association and it was sent to the police. And I believe it discredited me. I found out through the HOA about the letter. I didn't see it. But the gist is that it discredited me for at least the first 2 years.
When was the first time you called the police, and what led up to that?
The first time I called the police actually was my first week in the condo when I heard her yelling the death threats. And I didn't have enough information. I knew someone was in trouble. I knew I couldn't just stand by. But when I called, I got dispatch, actually. I didn't actually talk to a police officer. And they started asking me if maybe it was her TV that was too loud. And I started feeling embarrassed. So I just cut the call short. So it was maybe, maybe 2 years after that before I started calling the police again.
Each and Every's gender-inclusive deodorant is formulated for sensitive skin, made without aluminum, parabens, baking soda, alcohol, and synthetic fragrances.
With just 5 simple ingredients plus essential oils, Each and Every uses natural ingredients like coconut oil and dead sea salt that work together to reduce body odor.
In fact, Each and Every has been found to provide odor protection equal to an antiperspirant without the aluminum.
Each and Every was founded by 2 women in the beauty industry who were frustrated with the lack of high-quality natural deodorant options. One of the founders holds a PhD in molecular and developmental biology and used her in-depth understanding about how the body interacts within different ingredients to help design Each and Every.
Each and Every goes on silky smooth and keeps you odor-free all day. Being vegetarian, it's important to me that the scents come from essential oils and ingredients that are vegan and cruelty-free.
My favorite scents are the cedar and vanilla, as well as the coconut and lime. Both scents remind me of summertime fun. They really smell great.
And you can try it risk-free with our 30-day money-back guarantee.
Go to eachandevery.com/stalking.
That's eachandevery.com/stalking and use promo code stalking for 30% off your first purchase. That's not eligible to combine with other discounts or subscriptions.
That's promo code stalking at eachandevery.com/stalking. And what prompted you to start calling the police again?
Well, what happened is that the homeowner association, they just didn't want to confront her. So when I kept lodging complaints about the noise, they just didn't want to deal with it. So they said, you're just going to have to call the police. So what they do is they will always do a welfare check on someone. She was able to hold it together with the police, and it actually made her feel elated. She intercepted me later and said, yeah, my friends called the police and they're sending nothing but the best to check on me.
What was your next step?
It ended up for the next couple of months being in another limbo. I occasionally called the police when the noise got out of control. I think that it actually encouraged her to keep yelling because she wanted me and she wanted the police to check on her. So it ended up being on the lower end of creepy benign with scattered yelling until about 2 years in, when all of a sudden her bizarre actions started to spike.
And how did it spike? Is this when the stalking began?
It had actually been going on a more subdued level for the first couple of years, with her intercepting me, letting me know that she knew my schedule. One day she piled a bunch of boxes labeled police outside my door. Like there was at least 10 to 12 banker boxes labeled police, where she was wanting me to know, hey, I've gotten into trouble. And she was, writing me notes like, hey, I left boxes outside of your door, really wanting me to look into it. But again, everything could be written off as maybe a misunderstanding. Like, okay, she's always intercepting me. She must be lonely, but I'm creeped out. She's put boxes outside of my door that are all labeled police. She's done something. She wants me to snoop, but maybe she just has low social skills. So where things really started to spike was around the second year, and the noise level just spiked. Her screaming became more frequent. It became more hysterical. I could hear more activity within her side of the wall. And it got so bad that I had finally forced the homeowner association to issue her a warning, a citation. And that's what made her just spike her actions against me, where it became more direct and more scary, where she was yelling at me from outside my door. She was banging on my door and ringing my doorbell, wanting me to come out, yelling at me through the window. And so at that point, I was just looking for more information about why this had suddenly spiked. And she had already let the boxes labeled police outside my door. And the last time we spoke, she had mentioned that, yeah, she was yelling a lot because she was pressing charges against people in another state. And so I just decided to look up the court case to see why this had suddenly spiked. And I thought, okay, she's under duress. This is why things are suddenly going crazy. Knowledge is power. And I found the court records where actually she was having charges pressed against her for stalking. And it was in another city, and there were 2 people involved. And what I found out, and what was tied to her screaming spike, was that these 2 people had pressed charges against her, and she had lost. There were no criminal charges, and she didn't have to do any jail time, but she still lost. And she started really taking her aggressions out on me.
When you say she lost and they weren't criminal charges, what types of charges were they?
It was 2 stalking charges brought against her. And what had happened is that she had violated stalking orders against 2 people. And those were the charges for violating the stalking orders. The fact that her victims were able to press charges and say, no, she's doing harm against us, that made her really angry. But what also happened is that the judge dismissed the case against her because she was so obviously mentally ill. He just stopped the proceedings and said, she's not fit to stand trial, get mental help. But it still made her angry.
Were you in fear for your safety?
Yes, absolutely. Every time I opened my door, I was afraid. Again, her door was 5 feet away from mine, and she had given indicators that she knew my schedule. She knew about me. She was listening. So every time I had to leave the house, I had to calm myself and say, okay, I have to go to work. I can't let her keep me from going to work. So I have to come up with a plan of defense of how I'm going to defend myself if she jumps me. Same thing happened if I got groceries. She could jump me when I'm getting groceries. And so every time I had to leave the house, I was afraid. Every time I was in my house, I was afraid.
Did you think that she would just come in and hurt you, or was it more she was going to get you coming and going?
Mostly coming and going, but there was also the screams. She was able to get hits on me by increasing her screaming through the walls, so that was also hurting me. And she was doing it at all hours, where like I was getting woken up at the middle of the night, or I'd come home and I'd hear it. There was just no way to relax and to enjoy some peace and unplug from it.
Did you eventually go back to the HOA with the new information that you found?
Eventually. What had happened, and it wasn't directly with the HOA because they don't really care about legal proceedings. What HOAs are good at is landscaping. And that's the limit of the HOA. And it wasn't just mine. Other friends, have had similar occurrences with their HOAs, landscaping, and that's it. But what had happened about 2 years into it was we had new management with the HOA. And I was still lodging complaints with them just for a record. But the new management said, okay, we're going to have a hearing with this so you can air your grievances about the noise. And again, I couldn't bring up the legalities and expect the HOA to address it. I just had to address the fact that we have bylaws about noise. So there was a hearing. There were 5 additional people in addition to me and the stalker. And during that time, I used that opportunity to confront her. And what I did was I circulated copies of the police reports of her other two victims in the other state, and took that opportunity with witnesses to say, I know what you're doing. Here's the evidence. And again, circulated copies so that everyone could see it. I want you to knock it off. You're stalking me, and stop it immediately. And so at that point, again, the HOA couldn't do anything, but at least I had it on record with witnesses. This is how I'm perceiving it. Stop.
Once she found out that you lodged a complaint to the HOA, how did she react?
That, when I lodged the formal complaint, is when she went ballistic. She spent the evening banging on my door, ringing my doorbell, screaming at me through the door to come out. It just sent her over the edge. And I think that it was just one more thing on top of her losing the court case with the other two people that just sent her over the edge. And again, it escalated. The screamings got more intense. The harassment became more targeted. Like I caught her trying to look through my windows. She started following me on foot and by car.
Did she ever physically hurt you?
No, she never hurt me. But at that point, it worked against me. Because at that point, my state's law stated that for me to be able to press charges for stalking, I either needed to be injured or I needed to be dead. And so I just had no recourse at that point.
At any time, did you consider moving?
So, yeah, I tried selling it a couple times. At first, I thought that, okay, she clearly just hates me. Maybe someone else will have luck. And of course, there was a little warning in the back of my head that the people who had the unit, the condo before me, they probably sold because of her. But I just thought, okay, maybe someone will have better luck. What I found out later, and my stalker admitted this in court, that she was scaring away buyers, going out and having nice, happy conversations with them, which you only needed to talk to her for a few seconds to know that something was wrong. And so she was scaring people off. That actually also worked out to my favor. And the reason why it worked out to my favor is because I later found out that I could have been held liable for selling the unit, knowing that there was a very real risk of someone next door being dangerous.
How did you find that out?
So I found out through the caseworker that I was assigned. In that area, all victims get a victim caseworker that helps walk them through the court proceedings. And I'd mentioned the selling, and that's where she told me, like, you would have been held liable.
How did you eventually get her to court?
Well, it took a lot of work. What happened that worked in my favor was that the law changed. It changed about 3 years into the ordeal. And what it was changed to was that victims only needed to prove fear. So again, I no longer had to prove that I was injured, or I guess, how do you prove that you're dead? I prove I was dead. But I just need to prove I was afraid. However, it took a while for the police to get their minds around the new law. It's just with any job description, they had to get their minds around and understand how the law worked. So it took them a while to learn the new law. And when I finally talked to an officer who kept up on these things, he was the one who suggested, do you think you're being stalked? And then we were able to start the proceedings from there based on the new law. When we met, I had about 4 years of evidence. It took a long time to build the evidence. Again, stalking is a very hard crime to prove. And so what I had collected at that point was first a log of incidents. And I kept a draft in my email draft folder. And every time something happened, regardless of where I was, I could pull it up and record the date, the time, what happened, how I felt, and so forth. So that way I was able to just always keep up on it. The second thing that I had was the other police reports from her other two victims that I had gathered to say, yes, this is a repeat offender. The other thing that I had were eyewitnesses. One of the neighbors witnessed my stalker following me. I got her to acknowledge it over email. So I had that physical evidence. I also had the proof from our HOA meeting that for the noise, where I said in front of 5 people, this is stalking, you have to cut it out. The final piece of evidence that I had was her yelling at me through the door, and I recorded it. And it was the one time where I was able to prove that she was targeting me specifically, and it was clear that it was me. Now, it wasn't admissible in court, but I was able to at least play it for the police officer as proof that, yes, this is happening, and delivering all the other information. So that led to her arrest.
What was it like in court?
Oh, court is awful. Court is just awful. Everything is so intimidating. The big thing was that I had to speak in front of the judge and present my case to him. We had to do several court appearances. I won't go through all of them. One of the court appearances was for her early release hearing. After her arrest, she was held in jail during the court proceedings, but she had the opportunity for an early release. I did not want her to have that early release because she would go right back next door and continue the terror. So I had to speak in front of the judge and say, don't let her out. That actually changed me because I couldn't hide behind anybody. I had to present my case in front of this big, scary courtroom with bailiffs and every legal person you could think of, including my stalker, hearing me say, this is what's happening. This is what she's done to me. I've tried talking to her for the past 4 years. Nothing's happened. I beg you, don't let her out. And that changed me. There was something about having the courage to stand up in front of everybody and giving that case. I don't know, just something about being in front of a bunch of people and I can't hide anymore. It gave me a lot of courage.
What were the results of the case?
So there were 2 separate things going on. One, on the civil side, I gained a stalking order against her, which again involved presenting my case in front of the judge. And I got it. And I also got written into the stalking order that she couldn't return home. So that was great. The second one, the criminal case, we settled out of court. So despite me being her 3rd victim that I know of, she still does not have a criminal record that I know of. While she was being held, while we were going through the proceedings, no one posted bail for her. So she did spend jail time as a result of her arrest and no one posting bail, but that's it.
How much time do you estimate that you spent dealing with her over the course of all these years?
Oh, boy. That's a good question. At year 1, maybe 10%. Year 2, it ratcheted up to, 50, 60%. And at the end, it was like 80 or 90% of my time where I was constantly updating my records and gathering information. I was constantly working at the police. I was also working pretty hard to get her mental help. So bouncing back and forth between the police as well as mental health representatives. It dominated my life.
Were you able to get her any mental help?
That's the other stickler, is that you cannot force mental help on somebody. Now, people always have the option to change, but you can't force it. Otherwise, anytime you or I had a bad day and said something off color, we could all be arrested or we could all be thrown into the mental institution. And the way that works, it was similar to the stalking law. You cannot force mental care on someone until they injure themselves or they injure someone else. So I was able to make a contact with the mental health representatives and have them visit her and have them ask, do you want to get help? But she rejected it every time.
How supportive were your personal relationships in your life during this time?
Boy, I have a great set of friends. Quite a few of them. They provided so much support. One of my coworkers, every time I went into work, she would force me during our coffee run to tell her everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. I needed it. And I was grateful that she was just that listening ear. Another one of my friends was just amazing. I would crash her place when it got too hot at mine. She was also a bit of an armchair criminologist and psychology. I think she has her associates in criminal psychology. So she was able to give me resources on how to view someone who might be a criminal and mentally ill, and helped guide me through that. And other people who were just there for hugs and support.
When you first told your friends about it, were they initially supportive or were they questioning it?
I chose the right people to tell the situation to. And I did gauge very cautiously who to talk to. And the friend who supported me the most, one of her associates in criminal psychology, through her learning, through her education, she knew that when someone tells you that something is going wrong, listen to them. And she did say what I was describing did sound crazy, but she also knew me. We worked together for years, and she knew me to be logical and detailed. And if anything, I tended to minimize things. At work, I don't escalate anything unless it's really something out of my control. So again, that one friend was the most supportive because she knew me and she listened.
Once the court case was over, what happened?
Well, boy, that was unnerving because once all the court proceedings are done, you get, or at least in my area, I got one telephone call. And that was a telephone call from an automated system saying, okay, your stalker's now released from jail. The end. Boom. I didn't get any other information about her whereabouts or anything. So I was essentially on my own. So what I did for my own sanity, just to know if she was going to come out after me again, was I set up a Google alert on her name. And what a Google alert does is that if your search criteria comes up on the web, it'll send you an alert and say, hey, look over here. We found what you're looking for. And I figured that if she started bad-mouthing me online or issuing any threats online, at least that would be one way to protect myself. And so what happened is that years actually passed. Like, I think it was 4 or 5 years after I set the Google alert, something got jostled on the web with her name. And I got the alert in my email. And what I found out is that she had been arrested again. And I pulled up the police report and found it was a similar situation to mine, where she'd become obsessed with someone, same complaints of ruckus being made. And this person she actually injured. She attacked her victim she attacked her victim one day. And I felt awful because I wasn't able to do anything to protect her from it.
After the court case, were you still living next to each other?
Yes, I stayed there in my condo for another 3 years after the court case was over. And again, what I'd learned about potentially being held liable, I was afraid that she was going to come back. And so I figured that I just needed to let enough time lapse just to make sure that at least in good conscience, I knew that she wasn't going to violate the stalking order. After her arrest, the HOA took the opportunity to finally evict her. Up to that point, again, HOAs are really good at landscaping. If they start getting involved with court cases, they lose the money to make everything look good and keep up repairs. So they were very reluctant to evict her. But when I got her arrested, it gave them the perfect opportunity to say, okay, now we're evicting you. And then I got written into my stalking order and you can't come back. So we had it down 3 different ways. Don't come back, don't come back, don't come back. But she had a history of not listening to people telling her no. So I stayed in my place for another 3 years, just making sure that she heard the no.
Did you see her again after the court case?
I did. And it was an accident. So after I got the Google alert and I was reading through the police report, I learned the areas where she was arrested and where everything happened. And I realized it's in my new neighborhood. And it actually overlapped with places that I frequented. So I changed my schedule and my hangouts, but I still ran into her. Now, at that point, I looked different. And also she had forgotten about me. Like, people involved with the court proceedings said, your stalker isn't even talking about you. She's talking about conspiracies and all this stuff. She's forgotten about you. So even though I was there in the courtroom, she'd forgotten about me. So fast forward to when I was running into her, it just didn't even register with her. Of course, I turned and ran like gangbusters. But I kept running into her, and I witnessed a couple of times where she was creating ruckuses in like the library. And it was pretty awful. And it left me with a decision on, well, do I have to move again, or do I just keep altering my schedule? So I altered my schedule. And I stopped frequenting the places, like that radius where I knew that she'd been arrested. And within a year, things calmed down again. So I don't think she's here anymore, but I don't know where.
What would you like to see happen to your stalker?
I wish that she would have that moment of self-realization where she realizes how much pain she's causing for so many people. And that she'd change her ways. I don't know if that's going to happen. She really enjoyed the pain she was inflicting on me. Some nights I would hear her laughter, and it was pure joy interspersed with her harassing me. She loved it. I wish that she would understand that her joy is someone's life being destroyed.
How many years total did she stalk you?
Just over 4 years. And I had read a statistic, I think it was from the National Stalking Institute, that the average length of time to be stalked is somewhere between 4 to 10 years. So I was right within the low range of the ordeal.
How much did you know about stalking before you were stalked?
Nothing at all. Up until that point, I would have said that stalking is something that happens in a relationship gone bad, and it's usually the boyfriend going after the ex-girlfriend. After my ordeal, I learned that it's a much broader definition, and I also learned just how common it is for neighbors to stalk other neighbors. but it's generally written off as petty neighborhood disputes.
How has your life changed from the experience?
I am definitely more likely to listen to my gut and to other people's guts when we notice that something's off. And I do act on it. Let's just act on this really quietly before it gets really bad. And it might be nothing, but let's do something since I'm not really feeling so good about this. The second way, I'm more likely to stand up for myself or others as a result.
What advice would you have for our listeners that are in the same position that you were in?
You know, a lot of people try to frame that question as, how do you avoid stalking? And I would actually want to reframe that with saying you actually can't avoid it. Now, listen to your gut instincts, the ones that say something's wrong, and just quietly try and leave the situation. Sometimes it's not so easy. If you were in the situation that I was in, if I had it to do over again, I would have left immediately. That's actually a better recourse than fighting, because a lot of victims end up dead. I've forgotten the statistic, but a lot of them do end up dead. Try to move quietly, leave the job quietly, find a way to block someone on Facebook, but try and leave as quietly as possible, because again, the people who stalk, they think it's their right to do it, and challenging them not doing what they want you to do, which is let them harass you to the point of tears. They want you to allow them to do it. So do it quietly as possible. If those first two options don't work, document. Keep that chain of witnesses. Keep that log of incidents. Collect everything you can, while still trying to do what you can to get out of that situation and disappear.
How do you suggest the best way to gather evidence is for someone in your situation?
Boy, for me, it started with getting her name. And it goes back to when she left a pile of boxes labeled police outside my door. When I didn't respond to her, she left a note, a card on my door, drawing my attention to the boxes. And, she was apologizing, but really she wanted me to look. But regardless, she left her full name on the card, and I kept it because I just thought, I might need this. So I used that to start researching in the area where I knew she was having problems. And again, she told me she was having problems, so I knew where to look. So I'd say just start paying attention to details. If you can run that background check, if you have enough information to run a background check, which is usually their name and their birth date, run it. You do have to pay for it. It's worth it. Start talking to people. Again, for me, it backfired because the neighbors wrote my stalker a letter of recommendation. But still talk to people. But above all, be patient. You are having to build a case against against a crime that is really hard to prove. So be patient, be meticulous, and be detailed.
How do you think the authorities could do a better job dealing with stalking cases?
I had the same conversation with the police officer who arrested, who got the paperwork going for my stalker. And at that point, I was saying, well, I guess the onus was on me to give you guys the detailed information. He said, no, it's on us. We need to be educated. Now, education takes time, takes money. And so by me flippantly saying, just be educated, I know it's asking for one more thing for these officers to take on. What I would suggest is that they listen to stories like this, where they're hearing the victim's stories
and all the different variations of how it manifests so that they can more easily recognize it. Because it can be passed off as petty neighborhood disputes or misunderstandings or cranky people.
Do you think that she'll ever stop?
No, absolutely not.
What do you want our listeners to know about your experience?
I would hope that my story reaches two different types of people. One is for the victim who is going through a similar circumstance. I hope that they would find weight in my story and through other stories in your podcast that they can compare to and say, wait a second, this happened to someone else. This is happening to me. It was one of the problems that I had when this first started. I had no frame of reference. Again, I thought stalking wasn't just an ex-boyfriend going after an ex-girlfriend. Again, always a man against a woman. The fact that a woman was coming against me, this was new information. And again, there were no other resources available for me to compare to. So I would hope that they would at least have a starting point for building a case of their own, or at least the affirmation that they're not going crazy. A lot of people called me crazy. And you do feel like you're going crazy. But I hope it would be that starting point. The second group of people would be the allies, the people who aren't going through it and who can offer aid and assistance. Again, my friend with her associates in criminology, she had the resources to know whatever craziness is going on, Amy needs help, and she offered help. And I did rely on a lot of people. I know that by asking help as a victim, it is draining on people. And so I was fortunate enough to have a broad enough circle of friends. And there were really 5 people that I relied on, where today I asked this person for this. Okay, now today I ask someone for this. Now tomorrow I'm going to ask someone for this. And be willing to offer the aid. And sometimes the aid was just support. That same friend I keep referencing, she went to court appearances with me and offered up her support with that. So yeah, allies. I hope the allies learn some skills that they can use to help other people in need.
Amy, what's life like for you now?
Pretty calm. I really worked hard to just maintain balance and rebuild my life. So it's kind of back to where I was before, where I'm still traveling, have a good circle of friends, and it's peaceful.
Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. It was nice to meet you guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
You can watch our episodes at youtube.com/strictlystalking.
And now we're on Patreon, where you can sign up for exclusive bonus episodes, live chat sessions, and check out show merchandise. Just go to patreon.com/strictlystalking.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.